Do you think that Microsoft Flight Simulator looks amazing? Check out Chaos Field for the Nintendo GameCube. It makes that game look like some pussy ass shit. Do you want the most immersive, realistic flight game ever? Pull your head out of your butthole and get in or get out. Chaos Field. That was that good.
Do you guys like blowing shit up, slicing shit with a sword, and dying way too often? If that's the case, I might have the game for you. It's called Chaos Field, and it is on the Nintendo GameCube. I, of course, am your host, the Nasty Bedazzler. I imagine below there's a joke about how I like drinking piss or something ridiculous. Let's get on to the review.
Chaos Field is a vertical shooter that isn't afraid to murder your pathetic ass. It was developed by Milestone Inc. and published by Able Corporation. It was released in Japan in arcades on the Dreamcast in 2004 and on the GameCube in Japan and North America in 2005, as well as the PS2 in Japan also in 2005. Today I'm looking at the GameCube version since it is the only version that was released in my country, and I also need to show this console a little more love, so here we are. This game is a boss rush, and I'm sure most of you know what that is, but if you don't, it is exactly as it sounds. You fight only bosses in this game, however the GameCube version does include a special mode called Original Mode that features gameplay a little more akin to a standard shooter with regular enemies and something resembling an actual stage before or during a boss fight, but these are very brief and it's pretty clear that very little effort or thought was put into these additional segments, and because of that I'll mostly be skipping it in this video because it doesn't really bring anything new to the table. That aside though, it's a boss rush. If you've seen my playthrough of Ketsui Death Label for the Nintendo DS, then you already know what I'm talking about here as far as gameplay goes. If you haven't seen that, I'll link to it below. That game fucking rules.
Aside from the scoring, the gameplay in Chaos Field isn't so incredibly complex that you're gonna shit your pants. However, there are a few things about it that set it apart from other shooters, and since I'm already here to review this one, why don't we take a look at what those things are? You guys wanna talk about it? Let's talk about it.
Starting out, you're greeted with a title screen, which I'm sure we can all agree is fairly standard procedure. Select the mode you want to play, either arcade mode or original mode, which honestly calling it original mode doesn't make any sense. It's just brand new only to the GameCube as far as I know, so there's nothing original about it. Then you choose your character. You got 3 choices here, 2 nasty boys and a chick. While that sounds like a setup to a porno I don't want to watch, these characters do have their own separate attributes, which I'll cover, now. There are 3 fighters to choose from, and we'll discuss them each in a moment. Each fighter has 4 moves at their disposal. They have a standard shot, which differs between the 3 ships, a sword attack that is consistent across all 3 ships that can clear all oncoming bullets except those that are purple, and the wing layer, which is different across the 3 ships, and it acts as a shield blocking all oncoming bullets in a specific way for a certain amount of time, but can also cause the enemy damage. And finally, the lock-on shot. When the button is held down, a radar scans the area in front of the ship for attack points, and any that are in range will be locked on, then attacked with missiles. This lock-on shot operates differently amongst the 3 ships, mostly in the length of range each ship has in order to find targets and lock onto them. Let's take a look at the characters you can control. Bachelor number 1 is named Hal. He's a playful little scamp that likes long walks on the beach and daydreaming about a life that includes parents that didn't name him Hal. He is more or less the default character and middle of the road stat-wise. He is good for beginners as he's well-rounded across the board. This handsome little fellow pilots a blue ship because blue is as boring as his name and it's the same color as his hair. His hair sucks though, but playing with this character is a good choice in my opinion. He has a standard forward shot that crosses the entire playing field and is mostly forward firing, so you can't sweep the entire playfield easily, but it gets the job done. He also has a lock-on attack that only targets a limited range directly in front of the ship, and a wing layer ability, more on those later, that features a straight firing shield that hovers a quarter screen in front of the player that offers very little protection from enemy fire. It is decent though for attacking any enemy since it can be aimed easily to deploy where you want it to go. Bachelor number 2 is named Jin, named after his parents' favorite drink that helped them conceive this mysterious little imp. From what I understand, his mother enjoyed sewing and his father became an asshole after his career as a magician never took off. None of this is true, but we need to make Jin sound more interesting than what the Tinder profile would suggest because he looks like a creep with spinal bifida. What is actually true, according to the game lore, is that he may or may not have been built from organic data obtained from a captured enemy, and none of this makes any fucking sense to me. What is organic data, you might ask? I have no idea. His ship is a golden yellow, or as the game calls it, fake yellow, and it's his favorite color as it's the same as piss, which he enjoys. It is slower than the other options, but more powerful because that's how these games work. His standard shot is pretty lame. It's a short-range weapon that leaves a trail of electricity in a straight line from your ship. His lock-on shot is the best of the three, however, with a range across the playing field, so it's easy to hammer away at the enemies with missiles if you can keep your meta gauge up. I'll talk more about that later. And finally, we have our bachelorette, Ifumi. The description of her abilities the game gives her is ridiculous, so I'll put it into my own words. Her ship is fast and her gun is interesting. It's essentially the same as the power shot in cave shooters that lock onto attack points and stays there as long as you keep firing. It doesn't exactly feel powerful, but it is convenient enough if you find yourself having a hard time attacking the enemy's weak points. Her wing layer shield is probably the best of the bunch, as 2 large balls of energy circle close to her ship and absorb any oncoming enemy fire that isn't a purple shot. Overall, she's a well-rounded character, same as Hal, though slightly less powerful. Now that we've met our contestants and have a vague idea of what their abilities are, let's go into the gameplay. First off, let's talk about the controls and lead right into every single other thing, which there's quite a lot of. I will say that there's a ton of shit to this game and it can seem overwhelming, but for those of you who just want to play the game and make progress through it, you can easily do that while mostly ignoring all of the scoring mechanics and whatnot going on behind the scenes. That being said, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't cover as many aspects of the game as I can, so let's do this. Chaos Field controls like any other competent shooter out there, though some might find using the GameCube controller a bit tedious since it just wasn't designed for the type of precise control games like this require. The D-pad is notoriously garbage, and analog sticks suck for games like these. However, I opted to use the analog stick here, and I actually didn't find it to be all that bad. If I had to guess, this port of the game was tweaked for use with the analog stick, and after a couple plays, I found myself pretty used to the controls. Your mileage may vary here, but overall, it isn't difficult to control your ship with this controller, even though it's not the ideal way to play any game of this type. The game is played using only 4 main buttons, and then either the X or Y buttons to switch fields, which I will discuss shortly. The default is as follows: B is your shot, A is your sword, holding down L will activate your homing missiles, and R will activate your wing layer shield. It's very simple, though getting the hang of using these different options with each other and in each situation is where things get tricky here. Certain attacks require a very short cooldown, such as the lock-on missiles and the wing layer shield. So can the sword attacks if you do multiple attacks in a row, and the cooldown is extremely brief. About a second, but that's all it takes for you to take damage from unavoidable bullets if you didn't plan ahead. Some of these moves also require you to use meta from your meta gauge, which means that these are limited use abilities unless you recharge your meter. The meta gauge is on the top left of the screen, and this can be refilled by collecting these red orbs, which drop from defeated enemy sections, cleared bullets, or even from your own ship every time you take damage from enemy fire. Every ship requires the use of meta for the lock-on missiles and for the wing layer shield. However, the sword or regular shot can be used infinitely without using this gauge. Once your meta gauge is filled completely, bonus point orbs will be dropped instead of the red orbs, which grant you 5,000 points each. If you deplete your meta gauge at all, the enemy will then drop the red orbs once again. Let's talk about field switching for a moment. Since I suck at this game, I didn't do it often. In fact, I mostly forget it exists since I'm just struggling to stay alive and not thinking about score, but pressing X or Y during the game will switch fields from either Order Field to Chaos Field or vice versa. Order Field is your default field, and by switching over to Chaos, it changes certain aspects of the game, and there are quite a lot of changes here from how powerful your ship's attacks are to how powerful your enemy's shots are. It will also change the enemy's shot patterns and even add more gun turrets to the enemy, which in turn adds more bullets to the screen. You can target bullets with lock-on missiles in Chaos mode only, and clearing as many things as possible with missiles increases your combo counter on the right side of the screen. You can also do this with your wing layer shield, but not with your sword or standard shot. Building up this combo meter results in a higher score, which results in more lives and a better ranking at the end of the game. Enemies drop less red orbs in this mode, so things are infinitely more difficult, but the possibility for a much higher score goes way up if you know what you're doing. There's never a point in the game where you need to switch fields, so this is purely optional. Now, again, I spent very little time in Chaos Mode because this game kicked my ass already, and the time I did spend in it, it was spent dying even more. So, by default, I just played the game through in order mode so I could make at least a little progress through the game. I briefly mentioned the combo meter, and as I said, this is increased by destroying enemies or bullets if you're in Chaos Mode with the lock-on missiles or wing layer shield within a set amount of time. You also have a combo timer that counts down between hits. When this reaches 0, the combo ends. There are ways to keep this timer from counting down, such as gaining new hits on the enemy or touching the enemy with your wing layer, even if it isn't doing damage. If your wing layer overlaps with the boss, the timer stops. These combos increase your score, and the more points you get, the more likely you are to get additional lives, called shields, in this game. You are awarded an extra shield at your first 8 million points, and additional shields at every 20 million points thereafter. Speaking of shields, you start the game out with 3 shields by default, and when you take damage, you lose a shield. Dropping to 0 will end the game, and you are then asked if you want to continue. You are given up to 9 continues, and if you're just starting out, you will need them all, and probably more than that, but when these are gone, it's game over. I was only able to see this game through to the end by using cheat codes with Swiss, the software I'm using on my GameCube to run games from the bottom port, and I can tell you that this game is hard as shit, so it's going to take quite a lot of practice to beat this one with the amount of continues you are given. Alright, Jesus Christ. Okay, enough with all the scoring bullshit and with the controls and all that out of the way. Let's actually talk about how the game plays. This is the actual fun part of the game and of this review, since I'm not exactly too interested in scoring, especially at this point, since I'm just not good enough to care, because all I care about is staying alive. This is a short game, and you can beat it in about 20 to 30 minutes, and there are 5 stages, and each stage is comprised of 3 different boss battles. None of these bosses are particularly interesting as far as their design is concerned, and they aren't exactly interesting in their attacks either. While writing this review, I can't really remember what any of these bosses look like because it just isn't really important. You'll be mostly focused on your ship and watching the bullets around you than you will be on the scenery and your enemy. What you'll get here should be familiar for those who have played a bullet hell shooter before. There are waves of increasingly difficult bullet patterns to navigate through, and there are different types of enemy fire that you will need to be aware of. There are standard bullets, which can be of any color aside from purple and any size, and these can be destroyed with your sword or with your wing layer shield. In Chaos Mode, these can also be destroyed with your lock-on missiles. There are the aforementioned purple bullets, which cannot be destroyed and need to be dodged. These are what make this game damn near impossible in the later stages because you will need to be navigating around these while clearing the other bullets and making a safe path for your ship to navigate through while also trying to attack the enemy. You cannot shoot and swing your sword at the same time, so it becomes a dance shifting between attack and defense while navigating through a maze of bullets, and it gets fucking insane at times, and with so much going on at once, it is very easy to become confused with all the action on screen. The enemy can also fire missiles similar to your own, and these cannot be blocked either. However, these are not exactly accurate and are fairly easy to avoid. But when all of these different attacks are on the screen at once, it can become overwhelming fairly quickly. I found that the lock-on missiles, standard shot, and the sword are mostly what I needed to survive. The shield I did use, but infrequently because it just wasn't very effective for me. While it does block some bullets, it just doesn't work as well as your sword, and I think mainly exists for those looking to build up their combo meter and their score. And since I wasn't trying to do that, I would rather save my meta gauge for my lock-on missiles to attack the boss. At the top of the screen while fighting a boss is your standard boss life meter. The more you attack the boss, the more this gauge goes down. Again, pretty standard stuff here and most likely nothing you aren't familiar with. Above that is a timer, and there's no threat to this timer running down to 0. There is a bonus for defeating the boss with time remaining as it adds to your score though. If you cannot complete the boss before this reaches 0, that particular boss fight will end and the next one will begin. There are specific weak points on each enemy, and many of these can be destroyed by consistently targeting them, so if you're familiar with a boss and a certain attack is giving you a difficult time, you can spend your time attacking certain points to destroy those weapons and give you a better chance of survival. Or you can just attack everything equally, as any damage any part of the boss takes will all contribute to a loss of life from their health gauge.
Now, understandably, this game can seem a bit daunting, but I do want to stress that this one can easily be picked up and played just with the basic knowledge of how the enemy bullets work and the abilities that your ship has. I know after the first couple plays that I went through, I got to stage 4 before being annihilated, and that was just a couple tries, so if I can do it, you can do it. Now, let's talk about the graphics and the music, okay? So the music in these types of games is expected to be pretty kick-ass, and I think on this front, this game does not disappoint. Instead of telling you about it though, let's just play a couple snippets for you to check out. See what I tell you? Music's good, right? It's good. I would never lie to you. So let's talk about the graphics, shall we? The graphics have held up really well, especially considering the era that this was released in. This was on the GameCube about 20 years ago, and everything still looks great even in 2022. If I were to have bought this on Steam for my PC, I wouldn't have even thought twice about it. Overall, it's like the ships look good, the enemies look good, the level design is great, the bullet patterns, everything is pretty good here, and there's really nothing to complain about. So, what do we think? Would I recommend this game?
Chaos Field as a shooter can be as complex or as brainless as you want it to be. Each ship you can choose has its own strengths and weaknesses, and familiarizing yourself with each ability and learning how to put them into play to defeat every boss can be rewarding and fun. This game doesn't break any new ground, and I've seen all of this before, but it is competently handled and is fun to play, though it might not stick around in your memory for too long after you finish playing it, but it's not a horrible way to kill 30 minutes if you're looking for something to do and only have a GameCube to do it on. It's also harder than hell. I haven't beaten it yet without cheating, using code similar to an action replay through Swiss for my GameCube, and I don't feel like explaining what any of that means right now, but maybe some... Oh god. Maybe someday in another video I might go more in depth on my modded GameCube. This definitely does not have the staying power of a game like Mushihime-sama Futari, or many other cave shooters for that matter, but since there are very few shmups available on the GameCube, those of you thirsty for a game like this to play may be thankful this exists, and it is worth checking out if this looks interesting to you. So what do you guys think of Chaos Field? Have you played this one before? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Let me know in the comments below. And I just want to say thank you guys again for making it to the end of the video. I always appreciate that. Have yourself a good rest of the week, and I'll see you guys on the next video.